Hello, my name is Priscilla,
Hello, my name's Daniel.
I'm Allison.
I'm Melanie.
and for our group topic, we decided to talk about cultural appropriation and cancel culture. So, for my part, I will be discussing and focusing on cancel culture and social media. So, the definition of it is cancel culture in social media is a form of publicly confronting an individual on past or current issues they addressed. So this a quote from an article I found on the school's database that talks about the experiences of victims of cancel culture says, quote, "This culture primarily targets people of brands whose opinions or behaviors are not regarded as appropriate by society." So a question I have is that what how does society know when a question is appropriate or not? Or when a topic is too sensitive to talk about?
I feel like it's when a single person or a group of people are offended by something. Like you won't ever know unless somebody speaks up about it, because maybe you don't realize that you said something offensive or your actions were offensive, but the second that somebody actually speaks up on it is when you're informed about it, I think. Yeah.
I also feel like you have to kind of know the surrounding you're at. Like you can't just go around like let's say religion. Religion's a very like difficult topic. It's not like you're gonna go at a party and just start talking about religion and then some people might get offended. I feel like you have to know when and where to say things.
Yeah, I agree with Melanie. I think it depends, like the social group you're around, because with your friends, you might talk about some things that you may think are appropriate to talk about, but in public or like in school or something, you might offend some people or you don't know how everybody thinks. So I think it's like be more aware of what you're actually like saying and stuff like that.
Yeah. I like all of your guys' responses. I feel like it's so important to only speak on certain topics if you're educated enough on it. Because you might say something offensive that you didn't know is offensive because you're not really educated on that topic, which like might create more harm than good. So coming back to this, three themes of cancel culture that cancel culture victims face on social media includes backlash, fear of social public shaming, and cyberbullying. So starting with backlash, this is where people that engage in cancel culture encounter numerous negative comments from a large internet space. So from any like social media platforms, have you guys seen a celebrity or an influencer or someone with a platform receive backlash for something that they've done in the past?
Okay.
I feel like for apology videos, a lot of people expect it to like get the people that are doing the apology videos expect to get sympathy, but sometimes it doesn't turn out that way, and the comments are just full of um she's just doing it to make herself look good or things like that, and it doesn't go the way they expected it to go.
Yeah, I've also seen some online, but I feel like most of them are just about like not because they actually regret their actions, but because they got caught or because they got exposed or something. So I feel like they have
Mhm.
to make an apology video in order to just like get some of the people on their side instead of actually feeling bad about what they did.
I agree. I feel like sometimes it's easy or difficult to notice when a person's being sincere with an apology. So I feel like backlash comes with kind of like knowing the person you gave that platform to and knowing if you decide to forgive them or allow them to continue having a platform after the controversy that they're facing. So the second theme is fear of public shaming. This is where you never use public shaming to reform conduct or call attention to the shortcomings of others because it can harm a person mentally and may result in mental health issues. So sometimes with fear of public shaming, this is where influencers or celebrities who may have offended their fan base or anyone online, and some people choose to fight back with violence, which can include sending death threats to that person or their family, or exposing where they live, their address, which can put people in harm. And from this, like public shaming on social media, it can also cause mental health issues, which can be having an eating disorder, depression, anxiety. The list is endless. And then for lastly, the third theme is cyberbullying. So it's bullying in the form of cancel culture that's a new phenomenon and that can insist in hostility online. So cyberbullying or sending threats on social media is common in today's world. A main app where I have noticed more cyberbullying occurring is on TikTok. So now we'll be entering the part where cancel culture varies on the level of fame. So to be more specific, it's easier to cancel an influencer rather than a celebrity. For example, in 2022, Kanye West's Semitic hate speech. So he tweeted that in 2022, Kanye West tweeted that he was going to quote DEFCON 3 on Jewish people, and has even gone as far as to praise Hitler. Also, during this time, during his Yeezy Paris Fashion Week, he wore a shirt displaying the phrase, quote, White Lives Matter, featuring black models in the shirt. The phrase, quote, White Lives Matter was adopted by neo-Nazis and white supremacist groups in response to Black Lives Matter movement that was occurring in 2020 during the pandemic. So even though Kanye West lost brand deals during that year, which included Balenciaga, Adidas, Gap, but he was never truly canceled because for his hate speeches and actions, because today he still has a platform where he is able to release music, still sell well with his companies, and he still has supporters who have never left his side. So with the discussion of anti-Semitism, it ties back to a class lecture that we had a couple weeks ago where we all discussed the origins of Israel and Palestine, which is the topic of Zionism. So to be more specific, in Eastern Europe, when modernization and ethnic nationalism began taking place, the question normally was, can/should Jews really be integrated? So with this question came the growth of anti-Semitism, where some individuals supported Jewish progress toward integration while others disagreed. In today's world, Zionism involves Zionists who believe in the development and protection of a Jewish nation. Hate speeches, such as the ones that Kanye West has made publicly against Jewish people, only resurfaces old history where during the time where supporting Jews was frowned upon. Not only that, but Kanye West could have also put Jews' lives on at risk because there are many racist Americans who believe in white supremacy and believe that it's acceptable to be racist because one of their top celebrities, one of their role models is someone who is publicly shaming or being racist towards Jews. So it makes normal people think that, or non-celebrity people think that it's okay to be able to be racist towards a specific group of people in society. Also, with the current conflicts regarding Israel and Palestine, I'm a firm believer that if Kanye West, if all of this occurred during this year, between 2023 to 2024, he probably would have been canceled and wouldn't have a platform because these actions that he made in 2022 have never resurfaced on social media, which is something that I found very surprising. Also, back to why it's easier to cancel influencers than it is a celebrity. Influencers are easier to cancel because they are famous for creating entertaining social media content. Most people find that influencers are a lot more relatable because influencers are closer to their fan base. For example, many of them don't have social media training, they don't have assistants or have any social media managers or anything like that, and they're mainly the ones who take control of their social media platforms. For example, if they see any kind comments, they're the ones who are likely commenting back, following people who support them, and they're more they do not get stalked by paparazzis when they leave their homes or when they attend any famous events like a red carpet or music awards, and they also don't have any popular articles such as Forbes, LA Times, and New York Times creating headlines about them. To be more specific, TikTok influencers will be my main source of topic for quote influencers. So for TikTok influencers, they're the ones who have been gaining more popularity, and they are famous because of their relatable content, which excites their audience. Because they have no, quote, Hollywood talent. For example, they aren't Nepo babies, they aren't actors, musicians, or dancers. Their fame is based on the image they choose to present to the world. This is both good and bad because if they say anything controversial or say anything that someone may not agree with, they can get canceled in the blink of an eye. This also varies how sometimes this is where cancel culture begins to get complicated because sometimes cancel culture can sometimes be an excuse to cancel someone that you don't like. The quote, the term bandwagon is supporting something simply because everyone else is doing the same. Jumping on a quote hate train is something we see normally on TikTok. Once a TikTok influencer gets canceled, people begin to say, quote, I knew there was something that I didn't like about them, or it's about time that they get canceled. And it just goes back to how canceling an individual is a choice. People sometimes pick and choose when someone will be forgiven, as well as forget those who are not deserving of their platform.
Okay, I just wanted to say something about that last part too. How that's like one of the really popular things I've seen is that once someone gets like too famous or that they see so many people liking like a person, then everyone just wants to like find a way to hate them or try to find something about them to like expose them, even though that person hasn't really done anything bad. But it's the internet, so people will just try and find something bad.
Mhm. Um, do we want to move on to cultural appropriation now? Is that okay? Okay.
Yeah.
Um, so cultural appropriation is the adoption of customs, ideas, and other elements of one cultural group that's taken by another. So when I was researching, I found an article where a professor was arguing that appropriation can't be separated from learning and intellectual growth. And I thought he brought up an interesting take on the overall concept of appropriation in the way he's like making a claim that it's not necessarily a horrible thing to do, like because he's viewing it and making a comparison to it as something as natural as learning. So I just wanted to know, like, what are your guys' thoughts on this?
Okay. I think it's kind of like how like someone goes into like let's say they move to a different place, like a different city. It's kind of like learning about how other people like do their everyday lives. So they may not know something about them or something about like the food or the customs, the way that people live there. So I think yeah, it's kind of like learning about just like everyday life about different people.
feel like sometimes cultural appropriation, like calling someone out, is honestly like sometimes a good thing because with the right motivation, because sometimes if you use like I feel like cancel culture plays in cultural appropriation. Like let's say someone who kind of like I feel like something that I've been like noticing lately, like on social media, is that when like a white person or a non-black person uses a bonnet, they get faced with cultural appropriation, saying that, oh, they shouldn't be using bonnets because they are only like specified for like black people's hair, which isn't really the case. I feel like that bonnets have been like adopted into like African American like culture, but it's not technically part of it, if that makes sense. I feel like just because a certain like race uses it doesn't mean that other people can't use it as well.
Yeah, I think you're bringing up like a really interesting point where it's kind of like this concept of gatekeeping. Like, I don't know why we as a society want to gatekeep certain products or clothes when like bonnets in particular are technically just meant for curly haired people. Like, I don't think it really has a specific culture or ethnicity tied to it, but it's just like kind of that idea of cancel culture where we everyone just wants to find a way to cancel, I guess.
Yeah.
And oh, and kind of like relating this back to the book we read by Appia, he discusses a sense of interconnectedness and how all cultures kind of like stems from one another. So he kind of makes the point that there's not an exact distinction like that draws the line with what one culture can practice versus the other. And so I kind of just wanted to relate this back to some cultural traits that are made to seem as if only an individual of that culture can express those traits. Sorry, that sounds like a little confusing, but I'm referring to like hairstyles like dreadlocks and braids. We know they're usually affiliated with people of Black culture or ethnicity. And although I have seen like in Mexico, it's very common to get your hair done in braids and stuff like that. So it kind of just depends on the area you're at and what their beliefs are, if that makes sense. So another question I have is just kind of like, are we a part of the problem? Because there's trends that have been brought back and are popular now, such as wearing like bandanas as a shirt, but they were considered ghetto back in the day. And sometimes it's like we have these deep-rooted grievances in a way where we don't like that now it's a trend just because of the fact that it was considered ghetto before. Like, what do you think about that?
I definitely feel like society kind of has like, I feel like anything that white people do is kind of like praised for, kind of like the bandana shirts. Like I remember in the early 2000s, like a lot of people thought like that, like, people of Hispanic origin or like people who are like Latinos, if like they wore like bandanas or if they wore like very like loose pants or anything like that. Anything was seen ghetto because like
Mhm.
racism was the motive. Whereas during this time, you can kind of see how like brown lip combos or thinning out your eyebrows or things like that, or wearing like bandanas as tops. They're seen a lot of white people are doing that, and society sees no problem with it because I feel like society there is no like race like there is no race superior than the other, but society unfortunately has put that thought or mindset into our brains where it's kind of like white people will never like they'll always be superior to any other race, so that if they decide to practice or take from another culture, they will they won't like, in a sense, it's kind of like promoting it or making it more acceptable in society, which is kind of like unfortunate because like I feel like for us like Hispanics, it's like very like unfortunate to see that we're not receiving the same like positive comments that white people are for practicing what we've had in our culture.
Yeah, exactly. And so another example that I wanted to mention of cultural appropriation is where it's often seen in the entertainment industry. It's like when non-Latino people are cast as any like Latino roles, which kind of creates stereotypes and it's like limiting opportunities for actual authentic representation. So my question is, can public response to cultural appropriation be seen as a form of cancel culture? And what I mean by that is just like based off of the example I just gave, if people spoke up about it and argued that it was incorrect, would that be seen as cancel culture? Like, what do you think?
I think maybe there should, I don't know. That's a good question because sometimes there's like shows like on Netflix or something. I remember there was this one show on my block. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but it's mainly about like Mexican people kind of, and they casted like this one girl to like a role, but then like she couldn't really speak Spanish, so everyone like was like
Yeah.
getting mad at her. I mean, it's not really her fault, it's the people that make the show and stuff. So
Hmm.
yeah, I just wanted to say about that.
So kind of like what you're saying, in a way, sometimes people can justify it, but at the same time, they're lashing out at the wrong people for it. Because like
Yeah.
you said, it's not the actor's fault. It goes like above them.
Hmm.
But yeah, so I think that wraps up my part.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to touch up a bit about the cultural appropriation too. How it can also tie into other aspects such as like food. So like one video that I found was talking about how the Taco Bell guy, Glenn Bell, who started Taco Bell, he worked in like a Mexican restaurant before Taco Bell became really famous. And his story was basically that he worked in that restaurant and he learned about like the tacos from a Mexican person. And basically he made his own restaurant. He started his own business and everything, and he blew up. And I think some people would get mad at that because they say, oh, he's stealing like Mexican food and Mexican culture, such as like tacos. But I think at this point, tacos are like a national, like international food. Like everyone knows tacos. So I don't think it
Mhm.
just tie into Mexican culture. And that also brings me back to something that we learned like at the beginning of class of essentialism, which is to say that any group has something essential that the group must have, which is their part of their nature. And yeah, tacos did start in like Mexico, but at this point they've gotten so famous that I think for many different countries have their own spin on tacos, and it shouldn't just be part of one specific culture. I also want to talk about how like cancel culture or cultural appropriation can talk about how taking one things from marginalized or oppressed culture from like to white people because they have been the dominant race for like the whole of humanity. So and I also think how I don't think Glenn Bell really did anything wrong because he started his own business, and in the video it also talks about how they interviewed the people who worked at that restaurant still, and they said that oh that he did a good thing for himself because he was able to make money and promote his own business and start his own journey.
Mhm.
Okay. So I'm going to be talking more about how cancel culture is seen in society and how people feel about it. So cancel culture represents a change in how society views misbehavior and the balance of power between people with influence and people without it. The phrase has grown problematic. Some believe it is an essential tool for social justice, while others believe it's a type of mob justice restricting freedom of speech. Some see cancel culture as a way to make people accountable for their actions, especially when it comes to social media. It's a mean of addressing and drawing attention to problems like racism, sexism, and other types of discrimination. So my question is, do you guys think people are being quick to judge or are actually trying to be helpful?
I think it kind
Um,
of depends. Like, I know sometimes they have good intentions for calling out something, but maybe they just go about it in the wrong way. So that's where it's like maybe they're being too quick to judge and not really thinking before they're acting.
yeah, I think there's also a different side, just of instead of the negatives, there's also a positive side to cancel culture, so it can like bring aware to the public about like something that's happening, like someone that's a bad thing that someone did, or it can also bring attention to other like social injustices that are happening across the world that someone is like endorsing or saying. So there's also some positives that can happen about it.
Yes, I agree with you guys. And according to Pew's Research Center, 1 in 5 Americans see this type of behavior as a form of accountability. And the reason that they are calling it out is so that they can be helpful to others. They associate this behavior with moving towards a better society or educating others on their mistakes so that they can do better in the future. Um, However, others think it stifles freedom speech and destroys history, calling it equal to censorship and punishment. An example of how powerful cancel culture is. Kind of same thing as Daniel. I have a food discussion. There was a burrito cart in Portland, and it got closed because they were getting accused of cultural appropriation and stealing recipes. The controversy began when the owners were featured in an article where they described how they learned to make tortillas from women in Puerto Nuevo, Mexico. And a lot of people were saying that they weren't giving credit where credit was due. And this reminded me of the article of cultural appropriation, why food is such a sensitive subject, and how in that article, a Chinese restaurant in New York owned by a white couple faced backlash for promoting their food as clean Chinese food. So my question is, should people speak up if they're offended?
Yeah, I think that they should if they feel that there's something wrong has like being said or that they feel like something is getting said that is wrong about their own culture. Yeah, I think they should speak up.
Yeah.
I agree with that. It's kind of like you're just exercising your freedom of speech, and usually the only problem with that is when you're responding to it with more hatred or just hate in general.
Yeah.
I'm going to just read you guys two quotes that I found from the article as well, and I want to see if you guys think differently after it. One person said, if you do not say anything, then you are giving your tactic approval, and it is important to stand against offensive behavior in all interactions, not just social media. So that was kind of agreeing with you guys. But then another person said, offensive content is a matter of opinion. We are entitled to have an opinion others don't agree with. If you don't like something posted, don't watch it, unfriend the person, delete the person's content on your stream. What do you guys agree with that, or do you guys still agree with your first opinion?
I think
I think it
you can go.
you can go. Okay. I think it just depends on like what kind of stuff they're talking about. If they're saying like something really offensive, like hate speech or something, then obviously no. But yeah, it just depends.
Yeah, and also like depending on where you're seeing this, like say this is like happening in real time, real life versus something on social media, people find it easier to talk on social media and respond to things, but then say the same thing happens and you witness something that you deem like incorrect or wrong, and sometimes people don't act on it. Like, so I think it just depends where you're seeing it or where this is occurring.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes, like, I understand that how it's easy to say, like, oh, if you don't like this, if you don't like my content, my social media content, then, oh, just unfollow me or block me. But I feel like at the same time, it's important to, like, call out certain people, certain individuals on their actions, because if not, they're only giving motivation to their supporters that it's fine to act this way. It's fine to like be racist towards others. It's fine to say unethical things that may harm other people.
So I guess to kind of close up the discussion, do you guys think that cancel culture does more good or bad?